the hell hurt you?" the Mafia boss asked. Until sunrise, her stepfather had vanished. 22-year-old Nora Vasquez walks into the most dangerous nightclub in the city at 3 a.m., her designer dress hiding bruises that spell out a decade of systematic abuse. She's not there to party, she's there to die. But when notorious Mafia boss Lucian Kane sees her flinch at a man's raised voice, something in his predator's brain shifts to protector mode. "Who the hell hurt you?" he asks. And Nora's response changes everything. Someone who won't be alive to see sunrise. What Lucian doesn't know is that Nora has already poisoned her stepfather, the man who turned her mother's remarriage into a 10-year nightmare of calculated cruelty. The same stepfather who's currently bleeding out in their family home while Nora's mother sleeps, unknowing, upstairs. Nora came to the club expecting Lucian's enemies to kill her before dawn, making her death look like gang violence and protecting her mother from ever learning the truth. But Lucian, haunted by his own childhood trauma, recognizes the hollow look of someone who's been systematically broken. As the night unfolds, these two damaged souls form an impossible connection, Nora desperately trying to die for her crime, and Lucian unconsciously fighting to save the one person who might understand his darkness. By sunrise, one of them will have vanished, but which one? And whether it's by death, disappearance, or transformation. Please subscribe, tell me what you think in the comment section, and tell me where you are watching from. The bass line from the club's sound system vibrated through my chest like a second heartbeat, but all I could feel was the weight of what I'd left behind 3 miles away. Richard's coffee mug, still warm on the kitchen counter. The slight metallic taste I'd washed from my mouth during the drive here. The way his fingers had twitched once, just once, before going still. I pushed through the entrance of Kane's, and the bouncer's hand moved toward his jacket. Smart man. I probably looked like trouble walking in a designer dress at 3 in the morning. If only he knew trouble was exactly what I was counting on. "Easy, Victor." A voice cut through the music from somewhere to my left. Deep, controlled. The kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to be obeyed. "She's not armed." Wrong. I was the most dangerous thing in this room, but not in any way he could frisk for. I turned toward the voice and found myself looking at Lucian Kane across the VIP section. Even sitting, he dominated the space around him. Dark hair, darker eyes, and the kind of stillness that suggested violence was always an option, just never the first one. 3 men flanked him, but his attention had locked onto me with the precision of a predator recognizing something unexpected in his territory. Our eyes met for exactly 2 seconds, long enough for me to memorize the exact shade of gray in his stare, short enough that I could pretend it hadn't happened and continue toward the bar. The bartender slid a whiskey toward me before I'd even ordered. House policy apparently served the suicidal ones quickly. The amber liquid caught the strobing lights as I lifted it, and for a moment, I saw Richard's face reflected in its surface, not as he'd looked an hour ago, pale and gasping, as he'd looked this morning, reading his paper at the breakfast table, completely unaware it would be his last. "You planning to drink that, or just stare at it until it evaporates?" I startled, nearly dropping the glass. A man had appeared beside me at the bar, mid-30s, expensive suit, predatory smile that didn't reach his eyes. Everything about him screamed danger, which was exactly what I'd come here hoping to find. "Depends," I said, forcing my voice steady. "You buying the next round?" His smile widened. "Sweetheart, I'll buy you whatever you want. Question is, what are you really here for?" Before I could answer, his hand shot out and grabbed my wrist, not gently. His thumb pressed directly against the fading bruise hidden beneath my bracelet, and I couldn't stop the sharp intake of breath that escaped. That's when it happened. The music didn't stop, the lights didn't dim, but something in the air shifted, like the moment before lightning strikes when every hair on your body stands at attention. "Take your fucking hand off her." The man beside me went rigid. His grip on my wrist loosened immediately, but he didn't step away. Amateur mistake. Lucian Kane rose from his chair with the fluid grace of someone accustomed to violence. He didn't look at his men, didn't gesture or give orders. He simply began walking toward the bar, and the crowd parted like he was Moses and they were the Red Sea. "Kane." The man's voice had lost its cocky edge. "Just having a conversation. Conversation's over." Lucian stopped 3 feet away, close enough that I could see the scar that cut through his left eyebrow, close enough to smell his cologne mixed with something else, gun oil. Maybe. "Walk away, Petrov. Now." Petrov's hand tightened on my wrist one more time, a final show of dominance before releasing me entirely. "Sure thing, boss. No harm done." He melted back into the crowd, leaving me alone at the bar with the most dangerous man in the city. Exactly what I'd wanted, except now that it was happening, my carefully constructed plan felt suddenly, terrifyingly fragile. Lucian didn't speak immediately. Instead, he studied my face with the intensity of someone reading a map in a foreign language. His gaze lingered on the makeup that didn't quite cover the bruise along my jawline, the way I held my left arm slightly away from my body, the barely perceptible tremor in my hands. "You flinched when he raised his voice," he said finally. "Not a question, an observation." I took a sip of whiskey to buy time, feeling the burn trace a path down my throat. "Music's loud in here." "Bullshit." He stepped closer, and I forced myself not to step back. "Who the hell hurt you?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Not because it was unexpected, I'd known this moment would come, but because of the way he asked it. Like my answer mattered. Like someone hurting me was a personal affront to him, a stranger who'd known me for all of 3 minutes. I set down the whiskey glass with deliberate care, meeting his stare directly. In 12 hours, I'd be dead. What did honesty cost me now? Someone who won't be alive to see sunrise. "Hey, my friend. Hope you're doing well. Drop a comment and let me know how you're feeling about this story so far and where you're watching from. Are you already invested in Nora's situation? What do you think Lucian's going to do next?" The words hung between us like a loaded gun. Lucian's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Or calculation. "Past tense," he said softly. Interesting choice of words. My phone buzzed in my purse. A text message. My heart stopped as I glanced at the screen. "Mom, can't sleep. Richard's not in bed. Did he go out? Call me." The timestamp read 3:47 a.m. In approximately 2 hours, when Margot went downstairs to start her morning coffee, she would find her husband dead in his study. The official cause would be a heart attack. Richard had a weak heart. Everyone knew that. The unofficial cause was sitting in a vial in my purse, emptied into his nightly scotch while he read financial reports and planned tomorrow's systematic cruelties. I looked up from my phone to find Lucian watching me with renewed interest. "Bad news?" he asked. "Depends on your perspective." He leaned against the bar, effectively trapping me between his body and the wooden surface. Not aggressively, just claiming space in a way that made escape impossible without making a scene. "Let me guess," he said. "Abusive husband? Boyfriend? Father? Stepfather?" The word tasted like poison in my mouth, fitting, considering. And now he's what, dead? Dying? Or just about to wish he was? I tilted my head, studying his face. "Why do you care?" "Because I recognized the look." His voice dropped lower, intimate despite the chaos around us. "The hollow eyes. The way you hold yourself like everything hurts but you can't let it show. The careful way you breathe, like you're afraid making too much noise will set someone off." Each word hit like a precision strike. He wasn't guessing, he was remembering. "Takes one to know one?" I asked. "Something like that." He signaled the bartender for 2 more drinks. "Difference is, I learned to fight back before I learned to plan. And which one worked better for you?" "Neither. Both." The drinks arrived and he slid one toward me. Fighting back keeps you alive in the moment. Planning keeps you alive in the long run. But both leave scars. I picked up the fresh whiskey, noting how my hands had stopped shaking. Strange. For the first time in hours, I felt almost calm. "What if you didn't want to stay alive?" I asked. "What if the plan was never about survival?" Lucian went very still. "What's your name? Does it matter?" Everything matters when someone's about to die. The honesty in his voice almost broke me. Here was a man who'd built an empire on violence and fear, and he was looking at me like I was something precious that needed protecting. If only he knew what I'd done, what I was planning to do. "Nora," I said finally. "Nora Vasquez." "Nora." He repeated it like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. "I'm Lucian Kane." "I know who you are." "Then you know this is the most dangerous place in the city to be at 3 a.m. That's why I'm here." The admission hung between us, heavy and final. Lucian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You came here to die." "I came here to disappear." "Same thing." "Not necessarily." I finished the whiskey in one burning gulp. "Depends who's looking for the body." Lucian stared at me for a long moment, and I could practically see the calculations running behind his eyes. Cost-benefit analysis of getting involved with a suicidal woman who spoke in riddles about dead stepfathers. Any rational person would walk away. Instead, he picked up his phone and sent a quick text. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Buying us time." He pocketed the device. "Felix will make sure we're not disturbed. You don't even know what I've done." "Don't I?" He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow cut through the pounding bass. 10 years of systematic abuse. Stepfather who hurt you in ways that left marks on more than just your skin. Mother who either didn't know or didn't want to know. And tonight, finally, you decided to take control of your own story. Each word hit like a physical blow. You're guessing. I'm recognizing. His hand moved toward my face, then stopped just short of touching. The way you flinch from sudden movements but don't back down from direct confrontation. The careful way you sit like you're protecting ribs that have been broken before. The fact that you knew exactly where to find me at 3 a.m., which means you've been planning this for a while. I forced myself not to react, but my silence was answer enough. The question, Lucian continued, is whether you poisoned him or shot him. My breath caught. What makes you think? Poison. His certainty was unsettling. Because you're still here. If you'd shot him, you'd have blood on you, evidence to dispose of. Poison's cleaner, more patient. Gives you time to make it look natural. The accuracy of his assessment sent ice through my veins. You sound like you speak from experience. I speak from observation. Big difference. He signaled the bartender again, but this time for water. How long does he have? Had. The word slipped out before I could stop it. Lucian went very still. When? About an hour ago. I checked my phone. Another text from Margot. Really worried. Should I call police? Maybe less. Jesus Christ. He ran a hand through his dark hair. Do you understand what you've done? I understand perfectly. The words came out sharper than intended. I killed the man who spent 10 years destroying me piece by piece, who convinced my mother I was lying when I tried to tell her what he did, who made every day of my life a careful navigation between his moods and his fists and his... I stopped myself, breathing hard. And now you want to die for it. I want to disappear for it. There's a difference. Not from where I'm sitting. Lucian's voice carried a roughness that hadn't been there before. Trust me, I know the difference between justice and suicide. Do you? I turned on the bar stool to face him fully. Because from where I'm sitting, you look like someone who's made plenty of people disappear. Tell me, Lucian, was it justice or murder when you killed your first man? The question hit its mark. Something flickered across his features, pain, memory, recognition. I was 14, he said quietly. And he was trying to rape my sister. The simple statement hung between us, loaded with implications. I felt the ground shift beneath my understanding of this man. What happened to him? Kitchen knife through the liver. Took him about 6 minutes to bleed out. Lucian's voice was matter-of-fact, but his hands had curled into fists. Cops ruled it self-defense. Foster family shipped us off to separate homes the next week. Your sister, Elena, haven't seen her in 12 years. The admission seemed to surprise him. She got adopted by a good family, changed her name, built a life that doesn't include her psychopath brother. I saw it then, the mirror between us, two people shaped by violence, but he'd chosen to embrace it while I'd tried to escape it. Until tonight. She doesn't know what you became. She knows enough to stay away. He took a long pull of his drink. Smart girl. And you let her. I protected her. By disappearing from her life. By not contaminating it. His voice carried an edge of something raw. Some of us are poison, Nora. Best thing we can do is keep our distance from anything clean. The way he said my name sent an unexpected warmth through my chest. Dangerous warmth. Is that your justification? I asked. For everything you've built here? I don't need justification. I provide a service. People pay for protection, for problems to be solved, for justice when the system fails them. He gestured around the club. Half the women in here have restraining orders that aren't worth the paper they're printed on. The other half don't bother trying anymore. And you fix that. I make it stop. The distinction mattered somehow. I could see it in the way he held himself. Not proud exactly, but certain, like a man who'd long ago stopped questioning the morality of his choices and focused instead on their effectiveness. What about your parents? I asked. Dead. Car accident when I was 12. His jaw tightened. Elena and I went into the system. First foster father liked little boys a bit too much. Second one was more traditional, just beat the shit out of us for existing. And you learned to fight back. I learned that the world is divided into two types of people, predators and prey. I decided early which one I wanted to be. I studied his profile in the strobing lights. What if there's a third option? Which is? Guardian. He turned to look at me then, really look, and something shifted in his expression. Guardians are just predators with better PR, Nora. We tell ourselves we're protecting people, but mostly we're just finding acceptable reasons to hurt others. You don't believe that, don't I? but his voice lacked conviction. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. Margot's name lit up the screen, and my stomach clenched. "Answer it," Lucian said quietly. "I can't. Answer it, or she'll call the police." He was right. With shaking fingers, I accepted the call. "Mom?" "Nora, thank God." Margot's voice was tight with worry. "I can't find Richard anywhere. His car's still here, but he's not in the house. I'm getting scared." "Maybe he went for a walk?" I forced my voice to stay steady. "You know how he gets when he can't sleep. At 4 a.m, in February?" A pause. "Honey, where are you? I tried your room." "I'm at Harper's. Couldn't sleep either." The lie came so easily it scared me. "I'll come home in a few hours, okay? I'm sure Richard just—" "Wait." Margot's voice changed. "There's a light on in his study. Maybe he fell asleep at his desk again." My blood turned to ice. In approximately 30 seconds, my mother was going to discover her husband's body, and I was sitting in a nightclub, planning my own death, while she faced that horror alone. "Mom, don't. Oh my God, Richard, Richard." The line went dead. I stared at the phone in my hands, watching the call-end notification blink once before the screen went dark. Somewhere across the city, my mother was discovering that her husband of 10 years was dead. She was alone, confused, probably already calling 911. The paramedics would come, then the police, then the questions. By sunrise, they'd rule it a heart attack. Richard's medical history would support that conclusion. But eventually, maybe hours, maybe days, someone might run a more thorough toxicology screen. "Nora." Lucian's voice seemed to come from very far away. I looked up to find him watching me, with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not judgment, not pity. Something closer to understanding. "She found him," I said. "I figured. She's alone. She's alive." The distinction hit me like a slap. Margot was alive. Hurt, confused, probably terrified, but alive. Safe from Richard forever, even if she didn't understand why yet. I should go to her. "You should." Lucian stood up, pulling a few bills from his wallet and dropping them on the bar. "But you won't." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you came here to die, and seeing your mother's pain isn't going to change that plan. If anything, it's going to make you more determined to follow through." He was right, and I hated him for it. "Because if you go to her now," he continued, "you'll have to comfort her. Help her grieve a man you murdered. Lie to her face about why you weren't there when she needed you. And eventually you'll break. The guilt will eat you alive from the inside. You don't know anything about my guilt. I know you loved her enough to kill for her." His voice was gentle. "And I know that kind of love leaves scars when it's forced to choose between truth and protection." Tears stung my eyes, but I blinked them back. I'd cried enough over the years. Tonight was for action, not tears. "So what do you suggest?" I asked. "I suggest we get out of here before someone notices you're connected to tonight's newest widow." I almost laughed. "And go where? Your penthouse? Some warehouse where you keep the bodies?" "My apartment. It's clean, quiet, and not monitored by anyone who'd connect you to recent deaths." He held out his hand. "Unless you'd rather wait here for Petrov to come back. He's not the forgiving type when it comes to being embarrassed in public." I looked at his outstretched hand. Strong fingers, small scar across the knuckles, calluses that spoke of violence and use. Taking it would mean trusting him. Trusting someone whose profession was built on breaking people who trusted the wrong person. But staying meant facing Petrov or his friends, and I was tired of fighting. I took his hand. "One condition," I said as he helped me down from the bar stool. "What's that?" "When this is over, when I'm ready to disappear, you let me." Lucian's grip on my hand tightened, almost imperceptibly. "Define, disappear. You know what I mean. I know what you think you mean." He didn't release my hand as we started moving toward the exit. "Question is whether you'll still feel the same way when the sun comes up. What do you think about this deeper dive into both characters? Are you feeling the connection between them? Drop a comment and let me know if your team saved Nora, or if you think she should follow through with her plan. And where are you watching from?" Lucian's apartment wasn't what I'd expected. No gold-plated fixtures or intimidating artwork. Instead, it was surprisingly understated, dark hardwood floors, minimalist furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city like a command post. The only hint of his profession was the way he automatically checked 3 different locks behind us and the subtle bulge of a shoulder holster beneath his jacket. "Coffee?" he asked, moving toward the kitchen with the fluid grace of someone equally comfortable hosting dinner parties and disposing of bodies. "It's 4:30 in the morning." "Exactly. You're going to need the caffeine for what's coming next. I followed him into the kitchen, noting how he kept his back to the wall and maintained clear sightlines to both exits. Even here, in his own space, he moved like a man expecting trouble. What's coming next? I asked. Reality. He started the coffee maker, the domestic sound strangely comforting in the pre-dawn silence. Your stepfather is dead. Your mother found the body. The police are on their way, if they're not there already. And you're in the apartment of a known crime boss instead of comforting your grieving mother. Each word hit like a physical blow, but I forced myself to remain standing. I told you. You told me you wanted to disappear. What you didn't tell me is that you've just handed the police a murder investigation with a very obvious suspect. My phone buzzed on the counter where I'd set it. Another call from Margot. I let it go to voicemail. They'll rule it natural causes, I said. Richard had a weak heart. Everyone knew that. Maybe. Or maybe they'll run a full toxicology screen because your mother will tell them her stepdaughter wasn't home when she found the body. Lucian poured 2 cups of coffee, adding cream to one without asking how I liked it. How'd you know I take cream? Same way you knew I used poison instead of a gun. Pattern recognition. The admission hung between us, intimate in its accuracy. He'd been watching me as carefully as I'd been watching him. Nora. His voice was gentle but firm. What did you use? I took a sip of coffee, buying time. It was perfectly made strong but not bitter, exactly the right amount of cream. Does it matter? It matters if you want to live long enough to see sunrise. I told you, I don't. Bullshit. The word came out sharp. If you really wanted to die, you'd have taken some of whatever you gave him. Quick, clean, done. Instead, you're here, drinking coffee at 4 a.m. with a man you barely know, because some part of you wants to survive this. Before I could answer, his phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his expression darkened. Felix, he answered. What's wrong? I could hear the other man's voice, urgent and low, but couldn't make out the words. Lucian's jaw tightened as he listened. How long ago? A pause. Are you certain? Another pause. No. Keep them talking, but don't engage. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and turned to me with an expression that made my blood run cold. We have a problem. What kind of problem? The kind that involves your stepfather's business associates asking very specific questions about his death. My coffee cup slipped from my numb fingers, shattering against the kitchen tile. That's impossible. He was an accountant. He worked with tax returns and... He was an accountant who handled books for half the criminal organizations in this city. Lucian's voice was deadly quiet, including several who are currently at war with me. The room tilted. I gripped the counter for support as the implications crashed over me. That's impossible, I repeated weakly. Is it? Think about it, Nora. Where did the money come from? The nice house, your mother's jewelry, your college tuition? Accountants who file tax returns don't live in $500,000 homes. Images flashed through my mind. Richard's late-night phone calls. The way he'd sometimes disappear for days without explanation. The men who occasionally came to the house well-dressed, polite, but with eyes that missed nothing. I'd assumed they were clients. I'd been so focused on what he was doing to me, I'd never questioned what he was doing for a living. Oh God. The words came out as barely a whisper. Felix says Dmitry Volkov's people are already asking questions. Apparently Richard was supposed to deliver some very important financial documents tomorrow morning. Documents that might not exist anymore if he's dead. Volkov. The name sent ice through my veins. As in my father's former business partner. As in the man who's been trying to kill me for the past 3 years. Lucian's smile was sharp and humorless. As in the man who will torture you for information about Richard's files before he kills you. My legs gave out. I sank onto one of the kitchen stools, my mind reeling. This can't be happening. It gets worse. Lucian moved to the window, peering through the blinds at the street below. Because if Volkov's people are asking questions about Richard's death, they're going to want to talk to his family. Starting with his stepdaughter, who wasn't home when he died. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Margot. It was a number I didn't recognize. Lucian's eyes flicked to the screen. Don't answer that. How do you know? Because I know Volkov's methods. First they call, then they show up, then they start asking questions with tools instead of words. The phone stopped buzzing, then immediately started again. Different number. Jesus Christ. I stared at the device like it was a bomb. What do I do? That depends. Lucian turned from the window, his expression unreadable. How much do you know about Richard's business dealings? Nothing. I swear. I thought he was just an accountant. But you had access to his home office, his computer, his files. I never looked at any of that. I avoided his study completely. Volkov won't believe that. The certainty in his voice made my stomach clench. What are you saying? I'm saying you just killed the money launderer for half the organized crime families in this city. Families who are now panicking about their financial records falling into the wrong hands. Families who will do anything to get those records back or ensure they're destroyed. My phone buzzed a third time. Then a fourth. Turn it off, Lucian said. I can't. Your mother is safe for now. They want information, not revenge. But if they think you're running, or if they think you know more than you're saying. He didn't need to finish the sentence. I powered down the phone with shaking hands. This wasn't supposed to happen. No, it wasn't. You were supposed to kill Richard and then die in what looked like a gang shooting, leaving your mother to grieve and move on with her life. Lucian sat down across from me, his gray eyes intense. But plans change, and right now you have 3 choices. Which are? Option 1. I put you back on the street, and you take your chances with Volkov's people. Maybe they'll believe you don't know anything. Maybe they won't torture you too badly before they kill you. I shuddered. Option 2. You run. I give you money, a car, a head start. You disappear, change your name, hope they never find you. Of course, that means leaving your mother to deal with their questions about where you went. No. The word came out as a growl. I won't let them hurt her. Which brings us to option 3. I met his stare. What's option 3? You let me protect you. Both of you. And what does that cost me? Everything you thought you knew about right and wrong. His voice was soft but implacable. Because protecting you means going to war with Volkov. And going to war means doing things that will make your stepfather's death look merciful. The weight of his words settled over me like a burial shroud. In trying to save my mother from Richard, I'd put her directly in the crosshairs of something infinitely worse. There's a 4th option, I said quietly. Which is? I go to the police, confess everything, tell them about the poison, about Richard's abuse, about everything, let them arrest me. Lucian shook his head. You think jail will protect you? Volkov owns half the guards at County. You'd be dead within a week. Then what? My phone, even though it was powered off, buzzed one final time as the battery died completely. In the sudden silence that followed, we both heard the same thing. Footsteps in the hallway outside. Heavy, measured, professional. Lucian was on his feet instantly, gun appearing in his hand with practiced ease. How many people know about this apartment? I whispered. Too many. 3 soft knocks echoed through the space. Then a voice, accented but clear. Mr. Kane? We would like to speak with you and Miss Vasquez. Please open the door. We are not here to cause trouble tonight. Lucian's smile was razor sharp. Like hell you're not. He moved to the intercom panel by the door, pressing the talk button. Dimitri, working late tonight? You know why I am here, Lucian. Send out the girl, and we can resolve this without unpleasantness. And if I don't? Then we will wait. We are very patient. But Miss Vasquez's mother, she is not so young. The stress of police questioning, of her husband's sudden death. It would be tragic if her heart could not handle such strain. My blood turned to ice. He's threatening Margot. I know. Lucian's voice was deadly calm. Dimitri, you still there? I am here. Good. Because I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Lucian looked directly at me as he spoke, his eyes never leaving mine. Miss Vasquez is under my protection now. That means if you touch one hair on her head, or her mother's head, or if you so much as make either of them uncomfortable, I will personally gut you like a fish and feed your entrails to your own dogs. The silence that followed was deafening. Lucian, Dimitri's voice was patient, almost amused. You are making this very complicated. No, Dimitri, you are. And then Lucian did something that changed everything. Something that made retreat impossible and escalation inevitable. He opened the door. Holy tension. Are you feeling the walls closing in? What do you think about Lucian's choice to protect Nora? And that revelation about Richard's real job, did you see that coming? Let me know in the comments if you're Team Lucian or if you think he's making a huge mistake. Dmitri Volkov stepped into the apartment like he owned it, flanked by 2 men who moved with the calculated precision of professional killers. He was older than I'd expected, maybe 60, with silver hair and eyes the color of winter ice. Everything about him radiated controlled menace, from his perfectly tailored coat to the way he smiled at me like I was a particularly interesting specimen. Miss Vasquez. He inclined his head politely. You are much younger than I anticipated. Disappointed? I managed, surprised by how steady my voice sounded, intrigued. His gaze flicked to Lucian, who still held his gun but hadn't raised it. Yet, may we sit? This conversation may take some time. By all means. Lucian's voice was cordial, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. Make yourself comfortable. Dmitri settled into the leather chair like he was in his own living room, while his men positioned themselves strategically, one by the door, one by the windows, cutting off escape routes. Now then, Dmitri began, folding his hands in his lap, let us discuss Richard Hawthorne. What about him? I asked. He is dead, yes? Heart attack. Very sudden, very unexpected. Dmitri's smile never wavered. Such a tragedy, and so convenient. Convenient for who? For you, Miss Vasquez. A stepfather who, from what I understand, made your life quite difficult. And now, suddenly, he is gone. I felt Lucian shift beside me, ready to intervene if this went south. But something told me this was my fight to handle. Are you accusing me of something? I asked. I am observing patterns. Dmitri leaned forward slightly. Richard handled certain financial arrangements for my organization, very sensitive arrangements. And now, just hours before he was to deliver some critical documents, he suffers a fatal heart attack. That sounds like bad timing, not murder. Perhaps. Or perhaps someone wanted to prevent those documents from reaching their intended recipient. The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. Lucian's grip on his weapon tightened almost imperceptibly. What documents? I asked. Ah, so you do know something. I know that my stepfather kept business papers in his study. I also know I never looked at any of them. But you had access. I had access to a lot of things. Doesn't mean I used it. Dmitri studied my face with the intensity of a poker player reading tells. You know, Miss Vasquez, I have been in this business for many years. I have seen many people lie to me. You are not lying. Relief flooded through me, premature and dangerous. Which, Dmitri continued, makes this situation much more complicated. How so? Because if you did not kill Richard for his files, then someone else did. Someone who knew about his work for us. Someone who wanted those documents badly enough to commit murder. I felt the ground shift beneath my understanding of the situation. You think someone else killed him? I think, Dmitri said carefully, that Richard Hawthorne had many enemies. Not all of them were in his own home. My phone, even though it was dead, seemed to pulse with phantom weight in my pocket. Everything I thought I knew about tonight was crumbling. But here is the problem, Dmitri continued. Those documents are still missing, and until we find them, everyone who had access to Richard's files is, what is the expression? A person of interest. Meaning? Meaning you and your mother will remain under our protection until this matter is resolved. The word protection sounded like a death sentence in his accent. That's not necessary, Lucian said, speaking for the first time since sitting down. I can guarantee Miss Vasquez's safety. Ah, but can you guarantee the safety of her mother? Dmitri's smile turned predatory. Because right now, Margot Hawthorne is at the police station, answering very difficult questions about her husband's death and her stepdaughter's whereabouts. My heart stopped. The police have my mother? Not arrested, questioning. But police stations can be such dangerous places. So many accidents happen there. People fall downstairs, choke on their coffee, suffer sudden heart attacks from stress. You son of a bitch. I started to rise, but Lucian's hand on my arm stopped me. Easy, he murmured. Then to Dmitri, what do you want? Simple. Miss Vasquez accompanies my men to her stepfather's house. We search for the missing documents. If we find them, everyone lives. If we don't. He shrugged eloquently. And if the documents don't exist anymore? I asked. Then we have a problem, because my associates are expecting delivery of those files by sunrise. Failure to produce them will be poorly received. I looked at the clock on Lucian's wall. 5:15 a.m. sunrise was less than 2 hours away. This is insane, I said. I don't even know what documents you're talking about. Financial records, bank account numbers, transaction histories, the kind of information that could put many important people in very uncomfortable positions. Dmitri's voice remained conversational, but his eyes had gone flat. The kind of information that men kill for. Then why don't you search the house yourself? Lucian asked. Because the police are there, and because Miss Vasquez knows the house, knows where Richard might have hidden sensitive materials. Dmitri stood up smoothly. She is our key to finding what we need quickly and quietly. And what guarantee do we have that you'll let her go once you have your documents? You have my word. Lucian's laugh was harsh. Your word isn't worth the air you used to speak it, Dmitri. Perhaps not, but it is worth more than Miss Vasquez's life if she refuses to cooperate. I felt the walls closing in around me. Every choice led to disaster. Going with Dimitri meant walking into what was probably a trap. Refusing meant putting my mother in direct danger. And through it all, the poison I'd fed Richard hours earlier felt like a burning coal in my chest. "There's another option," I said quietly. Both men looked at me. "I tell you where the documents are, and you get them yourself." Dimitri raised an eyebrow. "You know where they are?" I was gambling everything on a guess, but it was the only play I had left. Richard kept his most important files in a safety deposit box at First National, box 247. I saw the key on his keychain. It was a lie, but it was a believable lie, and it bought time. "Interesting," Dimitri mused. "And the key? Should still be at the house, in his pocket. Which means dealing with the police, or waiting until they release the body." Dimitri considered this for a long moment. Then he smiled, an expression that sent ice through my veins. "Miss Vasquez, you are either very clever or very foolish. Perhaps both." He gestured to one of his men. "Pavel will verify this information, if you are lying." "I'm not lying. For your sake and your mother's, I hope that is true." Dimitri moved toward the door. "You have until sunrise. If we do not have those documents by then, our agreement becomes much less civilized." After they left, the silence in the apartment was deafening. Lucian locked the door behind them, engaged multiple security systems, then turned to face me. "Safety deposit box?" he asked. "I made it up. I figured." He moved to the window, checking the street below. "How much time do you think that bought us? Maybe an hour before they figure out box 247 doesn't exist or belongs to someone else. Then we need to move fast." Lucian pulled out his phone, dialing quickly. "Felix, it's me. I need you to get to St. Mary's Hospital immediately." "What do you mean, which one?" "The one where they took Margot Hawthorne." "Yes, I know she's at the police station now, but they'll transfer her to the hospital within the hour. Because she's going to have a convenient breakdown from stress, and she's going to need immediate medical attention that requires isolation from any visitors." I stared at him as the plan became clear. "You're going to fake my mother's medical emergency. I'm going to give her a real one that requires protective custody." He covered the phone. "Felix is a trauma surgeon. He knows how to make someone sick enough to need isolation, but not sick enough to actually be in danger. That's morally questionable? Yeah, but it'll keep her alive until we figure this out." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. Every minute my mother spent accessible to Dimitri's people was a minute closer to disaster. "What about the documents?" I asked. "The real ones. What about them? Do they exist?" Lucian finished his call and looked at me directly. "Probably. Richard was a careful man. If he was laundering money for multiple organizations, he'd have kept insurance files." "Insurance?" "Evidence. Proof of who paid what to whom. The kind of information that keeps people honest." He started moving around the apartment, gathering items. "It's also the kind of information that gets people killed if it falls into the wrong hands. So we need to find it first. We need to find it and destroy it, all of it, before sunrise." I felt a hysterical laugh building in my chest. "That's impossible. The police have sealed the house. I don't even know where to start looking, and Dimitri will be watching for us to make exactly that move." "You're right. It is impossible." Lucian's smile was sharp. "Good thing I specialize in impossible." He handed me a bulletproof vest and a small pistol. "What are these for?" "Because we're going back to your house, and because there's a very good chance we're not coming back out alive. What do you think about this latest twist? Are you buying Nora's safety deposit box lie? And what about Lucian's plan to fake Margot's medical emergency, crossing a line or necessary protection? Drop a comment and let me know if you trust Dimitri or if you think he's playing a longer game." The drive to my childhood home felt like traveling backward through time toward an explosion. Every street corner held memories: the park where Margot used to push me on swings before Richard entered our lives, the corner store where I'd learned to shoplift food when he'd forgotten to leave grocery money, the intersection where I'd first understood that some adults couldn't be trusted. Lucian drove with the focused intensity of a surgeon, taking back roads and checking mirrors constantly. The bulletproof vest felt impossibly heavy against my chest, a reminder that tonight had moved far beyond anything I'd planned for. "Police should be gone by now," he said, glancing at his watch. "They'll have processed the scene and released it back to your mother. Question is whether Dimitri's people are watching the house. And if they are, then this gets complicated fast." He turned into the alley behind my neighborhood. "Felix texted 20 minutes ago. Your mother's been admitted to St. Mary's cardiac unit. Stress-induced chest pains, completely legitimate. She'll be under medical observation until we sort this out." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by guilt. I'd spent years protecting Margot from Richard's worst impulses, and now I was using her as a chess piece in a game I barely understood. "She'll hate me for this," I said. "She'll be alive to hate you. Sometimes that's the best you can hope for." Lucian parked 3 blocks away, and we approached the house on foot. The Tudor-style home looked exactly as it always had: immaculate landscaping, freshly painted shutters, the kind of suburban perfection that hid decades of carefully concealed violence. Crime scene tape had been removed, but I could see the faint chalk marks where Richard's body had been outlined in his study. "Side entrance," I whispered, leading Lucian around to the garden door I'd used for midnight escapes throughout high school. He never changed this lock. The door opened with the soft click I remembered from 1,000 clandestine exits. Inside, the house smelled like my childhood: Margot's lavender candles mixed with the lingering scent of Richard's expensive cologne. And underneath it all, something new and metallic that made my stomach clench. "Where would he keep insurance files?" Lucian asked, following me through the darkened kitchen. "Somewhere he thought was safe but accessible." I moved toward the study, my feet finding their way automatically around the furniture. He was paranoid about digital records. Everything important was physical copies. The study door stood slightly ajar, and I could see the faint outline of where Richard had been found. The chair where he'd taken his last breath. The desk where he'd been working when the poison hit his system. The bookshelf where he'd kept his most prized possessions. I stopped dead in the doorway. "What is it?" Lucian asked. "The safe." I pointed to the far wall where an oil painting hung slightly askew. He thought I didn't know about it, but I've been watching him open it for years. "What's the combination?" "My mother's birthday backward, followed by the year they got married." Lucian raised an eyebrow. "Sentimental for a sociopath." He wasn't a sociopath. He was something worse, a man who understood love well enough to weaponize it. The safe opened with a soft electronic beep, revealing stacks of documents, flash drives, and something that made my blood freeze: photographs. Dozens of them, all featuring Richard with various men in expensive suits. Handshakes, dinner meetings, what looked like document exchanges. "Jesus," Lucian breathed, pulling out a folder marked "Insurance Policies." "Your stepfather wasn't just laundering money, he was documenting everything." I picked up one of the photographs, recognizing the restaurant where it had been taken. "I know this place. We went there for my mother's birthday last year. Look at the date stamp." The photo was dated 3 days before Margot's birthday. Richard had been conducting business while pretending to scout anniversary dinner locations. He used family events as cover, I realized. Every restaurant, every vacation, every seemingly innocent outing, he was building a network. Lucian was scanning through documents with increasing urgency. Bank routing numbers, wire transfer records, cryptocurrency wallet addresses. "Nora, this isn't just evidence of money laundering. This is enough to bring down half the organized crime families on the East Coast. Which means whoever killed Richard wasn't trying to hide these files, they were trying to steal them." The implication hit me like a physical blow. Someone else knew about the safe. Someone who had been watching Richard as carefully as he'd been watching everyone else. Lucian's voice was grim. "Someone who knew he was dead before your mother found the body." My phone, which I'd turned back on during the drive, buzzed with an incoming call. Unknown number. "Don't answer it," Lucian said. I stared at the screen, pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. "What if it's not Dimitri?" "What do you mean? What if there's someone else? Someone who knew about Richard's death before we told anyone?" The phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. Same number. "Nora," Lucian's voice carried a warning. I answered the call. "Miss Vasquez?" The voice was cultured, American, completely unfamiliar. "I believe we need to talk." "Who is this?" "Someone who has been watching your stepfather for a very long time. Someone who knows exactly what you did tonight, and more importantly, why you did it." Lucian moved closer, trying to hear the conversation. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said. "Of course you don't. You thought you were committing the perfect murder, didn't you? Poison the abusive stepfather, make it look like natural causes, die a martyr's death to protect your mother's illusions." The voice was almost sympathetic. It was a beautiful plan. Simply, elegant, personnel. "Who are you?" "I'm the person who's been waiting 3 years for someone to kill Richard Hawthorne. I'm also the person who's been preparing for exactly this scenario." My legs felt unsteady. "You wanted him dead?" "I needed him dead. But I also needed his files intact, which is why I've been watching his house, waiting for someone else to do the dirty work." A pause. "You've saved me considerable trouble, Miss Vasquez." Lucian was frantically gesturing for me to hang up, but I couldn't move. "What do you want?" I asked. I want you to listen very carefully. Right now, you're standing in Richard's study with Mr. Kane, looking at documents that could start a war between every major crime family in the city. Documents that certain federal agencies would find very, very interesting. I looked around the room, suddenly understanding that we were being watched. Federal agencies? I managed. FBI, to be precise. I'm Agent Sarah Kaplan, and I've been running a 3-year investigation into the money laundering operation your stepfather helped coordinate. An operation that's about to culminate in the largest organized crime takedown in the city's history. The room seemed to tilt. You're FBI? I'm FBI. And right now, you're interfering with a federal investigation by removing evidence from a crime scene. The police already processed the scene. The local police processed what they thought was a natural death scene. They didn't know about the safe. They didn't know about Richard's real business. They didn't know that someone had been planning to steal those documents tonight. Lucian was making slashing motions across his throat, but I couldn't hang up. Not now. Agent Kaplan, I said carefully. If you've been watching the house, then you know why I killed him. I know Richard Hawthorne spent 10 years systematically abusing his stepdaughter. I know he documented his crimes as obsessively as he documented his business dealings. And I know that any jury in the country would call what you did justifiable homicide. Then what's the problem? The problem is that those documents are evidence in a federal case. The problem is that Dmitry Volkov's people are probably surrounding the house as we speak. And the biggest problem is that if those files disappear, my 3-year investigation dies with them. I looked at Lucian, who was now pulling files from the safe with frantic efficiency. What are you suggesting? I asked. I'm suggesting a trade. You give me those documents, cooperate with our investigation, and I make sure you're protected from both Volkov's people and any murder charges related to your stepfather's death. And if I refuse, then you're on your own against some very dangerous people who want those files badly enough to kill for them. I was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Agent Kaplan? Yes? How do I know you're really FBI and not just another player in Richard's game? Because if I were another player, you'd already be dead. The line went quiet, and I heard something that made my blood freeze, car doors slamming outside. Lucian, I whispered. We have company. He was already moving toward the window, gun drawn. 3 cars, maybe 8 men, professional formation. Dimitri's people? Or federal agents? He looked at the phone in my hand. Question is, which one are you going to trust? Through the window, I could see figures moving across the lawn with tactical precision. Whoever they were, they knew what they were doing. Nora, Agent Kaplan's voice came through the phone. You have about 30 seconds before this situation escalates beyond anyone's control. Make your choice. I looked at Lucian, at the documents scattered across Richard's desk, at the safe that had held so many secrets. Then I looked at the chalk outline on the floor where my stepfather had died. And I made the choice that would change everything. Agent Kaplan? I'm going to hang up now. But first, I need you to know something. What's that? I don't regret killing him. Not for a second. I ended the call and turned to Lucian. How many ways out of this house? Not enough. His smile was grim, but oddly reassuring. But I've been in worse situations. Such as? None, actually. This is pretty much the worst it gets. Despite everything, I found myself smiling back. At least we're going down together. Who says we're going down at all? Before I could ask what he meant, the front door exploded inward. Are you feeling the pressure now? What do you think about Agent Kaplan? Is she really FBI or another player in the game? And what about Nora's choice to hang up? Was that smart or suicidal? Let me know in the comments if you think they can escape this. The tactical team that poured through our front door moved with the precision of military professionals, but something was wrong. Their gear was too expensive, their formation too perfect, their silence too complete. Real federal agents would have been shouting commands, identifying themselves, following protocol. These men were hunting. Basement, Lucian whispered, grabbing a handful of the most critical documents. Now, we made it to the kitchen before the shooting started. The sound of automatic weapons fire in the enclosed space was deafening. Plaster rained from the ceiling as bullets chewed through the walls where we'd been standing seconds earlier. Through the chaos, I heard voices calling out in what sounded like Russian. Not FBI, I gasped, following Lucian toward the basement stairs. Definitely not FBI. He paused at the top of the stairs, listening. But not Dimitri's people either. Different accent, different tactics. How many different groups want these documents? All of them. We descended into the basement, a space I'd avoided since childhood, when Richard had started using it as his private retreat. The smell of dampness and old cigarettes brought back memories I'd spent years trying to forget. Late-night sounds from down here that had made me hide under my covers. Margot's bruises the morning after Richard had worked late in the basement. There. Lucian pointed to a small window near the ceiling. Leads to the backyard. We can. The basement door exploded open above us. Footsteps thundered down the wooden stairs, accompanied by the tactical chatter of professionals coordinating a manhunt. Kane! The voice was heavily accented but clear. We know you are here. Send up the girl and the files, and we let you live. Lucian's response was to fire 3 shots up the stairwell. The footsteps stopped, but I could hear movement above us as they repositioned. Who the hell are these people? I whispered. Best guess? Chechen Bratva. They've been trying to move into Dimitri's territory for months. He was checking his ammunition with the mechanical efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. Richard must have been laundering money for them too. How many different criminal organizations was my stepfather working with? All of them. That's what made him valuable. Lucian moved toward the window, testing its lock. And that's what's going to get us killed. A new voice called down from upstairs, this one with a crisp British accent that made my skin crawl. Miss Vasquez? My name is Victor Sterling. I represent certain interests that your stepfather served faithfully for many years. I looked at Lucian, who had gone very still. You know that name? I whispered. International arms dealer. If he's here personally, this is bigger than money laundering. His voice was grim. Much bigger. Miss Vasquez, Sterling continued, his voice conversational despite the circumstances. I want you to know that we hold no ill will toward you for your stepfather's death. Richard was not a particularly pleasant man, and his proclivities were becoming a liability to our operations. The casual dismissal of a decade of abuse made rage flash through me like lightning. However, Sterling continued, he was in possession of certain information that extends far beyond simple financial records. Information that could compromise operations in 12 countries and result in the deaths of many valuable assets. Assets, I repeated quietly. He means people. He means spies, Lucian corrected. Richard wasn't just laundering money, he was handling financial networks for intelligence operations. The basement window shattered inward as someone fired through it from outside. Glass rained down on us as we pressed against the far wall. Surrounded, Lucian said matter-of-factly. So what now? Now we find out what we're really made of. My phone rang. In the chaos of gunfire and shouted commands, the normal ringtone sounded almost obscene. Don't, Lucian started. I answered it anyway. What? Miss Vasquez, this is Agent Kaplan. Are you injured? Not yet. Listen to me very carefully. The people in your house are not federal agents. They are foreign operatives attempting to retrieve classified intelligence that your stepfather was safeguarding. Intelligence? Richard Hawthorne was a CIA asset. He has been for 15 years. The money laundering was cover for a deep penetration operation into organized crime networks with ties to international terrorism. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Richard, my abusive stepfather, the man who'd made my life hell for a decade, had been working for the CIA. That's impossible, I said. The abuse was real, Miss Vasquez. Richard's personal failings were documented and regretted by his handlers. But his intelligence value was considered too important to compromise. I felt something break inside my chest. You knew. The CIA knew what he was doing to me, and they let it happen. Miss Vasquez, you let it happen because he was useful. My voice rose despite the danger. You let him destroy a child because it served your purposes. Lucian was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. Above us, I could hear Sterling's people moving through the house with increased urgency. The situation is complicated, Agent Kaplan said. But right now you need to focus on staying alive. Can you get to the documents? I looked at the scattered papers Lucian had grabbed from the safe. Financial records, photographs, flash drives, the accumulated evidence of Richard's double life. I have some of them. Good. There should be a red folder marked Prometheus Files. Do you see it? I shuffled through the papers. No. Then it's still in the safe, Miss Vasquez. Those files contain the identities of every CIA asset embedded in Eastern European crime families. If they fall into the wrong hands, people die. I get it. I looked at Lucian, who was methodically checking escape routes that didn't exist. But I'm about to die myself, so maybe that's not my primary concern. What if I told you that saving those files could also save your mother? My blood went cold. What about my mother? Margot Hawthorne was married to a CIA asset for 10 years. She had access to classified information whether she knew it or not. Do you really think foreign intelligence services are going to leave that loose end untied? Through the basement window, I could see boots moving across the backyard. We were completely surrounded. You're saying they'll kill her either way. I'm saying her only protection is if those files are secured and the operation concluded successfully. If this intelligence falls into enemy hands, everyone connected to Richard becomes a target. Forever. I felt the walls of my carefully constructed plan crumbling completely. I'd killed Richard to save my mother, and now that same action had put her in infinitely greater danger. Nora, Lucian's voice was soft but urgent. Whatever you're thinking, we need to move. Now. I looked at him, this man who'd shown me more protection and understanding in 6 hours than I'd received in 10 years of living with Richard. This man who was about to die because he'd chosen to help someone he barely knew. Agent Kaplan, I said into the phone. If I get you those files, what happens to Lucian? Mr. Kane is a known criminal. Mr. Kane saved my life tonight, multiple times, and he's about to die for it. A pause. The situation with Mr. Kane will be complicated. Complicated means you'll arrest him. Complicated means we'll evaluate his cooperation. I looked at Lucian again, seeing something in his expression that I'd missed before. Not fear, he was too experienced for that. But resignation. The look of a man who'd always known this was how his story would end. No, I said firmly. Excuse me? No. I'm not trading his life for those files. Lucian's eyes widened. Nora. Miss Vasquez. Agent Kaplan's voice carried a new urgency. You don't understand the scope of what's at stake here. I hung up the phone and turned to face Lucian directly. You don't have to die for me, I said. I'm not dying for you. I'm dying with you. There's a difference. There's another option. Which is... I picked up the scattered documents, including the flash drives that probably contained enough evidence to destroy dozens of lives. I give them what they want. Nora, no. And then I make them an offer they can't refuse. Before he could stop me, I started walking toward the basement stairs. Where are you going? I paused, looking back at this man who'd shown me what protection could look like when it came without price. To end this, one way or another. What do you think about the CIA revelation? Does it change how you feel about Nora's actions? And what about her decision to sacrifice herself for Lucian? Is she being heroic or foolish? Drop a comment and let me know if you think she has a plan or if she's walking into certain death. I climbed the basement stairs with the documents clutched against my chest like armor, each step taking me closer to what felt like an execution. Behind me, I could hear Lucian following, his footsteps carefully silent despite his obvious disapproval of my plan. The main floor of the house had been transformed into a war zone. Bullet holes pocked the walls, furniture was overturned for cover, and 3 men in tactical gear stood with weapons trained on the basement door. Victor Sterling stood in the center of my childhood living room like he owned it, his expensive suit unmarked by the violence around him. Miss Vasquez. His smile was perfectly polite and completely terrifying. How good of you to join us. I have what you want, I said, raising the documents so he could see them. Excellent. Please, set them on the coffee table and step back. Not yet. I kept the papers pressed against my chest. First, we negotiate. Sterling's eyebrows rose slightly. I'm afraid you're not in a position to negotiate, my dear. I'm in the only position that matters. I'm the person holding what you need. And Mr. Kane behind you is the person who could take those documents by force and hand them over to save his own life. I felt Lucian stiffen, but I didn't turn around. He could, but he won't. Such confidence in a man you've known for less than 8 hours. Sometimes 8 hours is enough. Sterling studied me with the clinical interest of a scientist examining an interesting specimen. You know, Miss Vasquez, I find myself curious about your motivations. You killed your stepfather to protect your mother, then planned to die yourself to protect her from the consequences. And now you're prepared to die to protect a criminal you barely know. It's quite the pattern of self-sacrifice. Maybe I'm tired of running. Or maybe you've finally found something worth dying for. The observation hit closer to home than I cared to admit. I glanced around the room at the family photos that documented a decade of carefully staged happiness, at the furniture Richard had chosen to project an image of respectable success, at the bloodstain on the hardwood floor where his body had been outlined. This house holds a lot of memories, Sterling continued, as if reading my thoughts. Not all of them pleasant, I imagine. You don't know anything about my memories. Don't I? I know Richard documented everything, Miss Vasquez. Every financial transaction, every business meeting, every personal indiscretion. The man was obsessed with evidence, with proof, with having leverage over everyone in his life. A chill ran down my spine. What are you saying? I'm saying that among the documents you're holding, there are likely photographs and recordings that even you haven't seen. Evidence of things that happened in this house. Things that might be uncomfortable for you to remember. I felt Lucian move closer behind me, a protective presence that I drew strength from. You're lying. Am I? Ask yourself, why was Richard so confident he could abuse you without consequences? Why was he so certain your mother would never believe you if you told her the truth? Sterling's voice was soft, almost sympathetic. Perhaps because he had documentation proving you were a willing participant. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stumbled backward, and Lucian's hand steadied me. He was recording, I whispered. Recording, photographing, documenting everything. Creating a narrative where a troubled teenager seduced her stepfather, then threatened to claim rape if he didn't give her money for drugs. That's not that, never. Of course it's not true, but perception is reality in the intelligence world, Miss Vasquez, and Richard was very good at crafting perceptions. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the documents. 10 years of self-doubt, of wondering if somehow I'd invited the abuse, of questioning my own memories. It had all been engineered, planned, documented. Where? I managed. Where are they? Safe deposit box at First National, box 200, the number I'd made up in desperation. Richard had actually had a box there, and I'd somehow guessed the right number. You're very intuitive, Miss Vasquez. Perhaps you knew your stepfather better than you realized. Behind me, Lucian's voice was deadly quiet. You son of a bitch. Mr. Kane, I understand your protective instincts, but this is simply business. Those recordings, real or fabricated, are part of Richard's insurance files, leveraged to ensure cooperation. Standard intelligence protocol. Standard protocol, I repeated, feeling something cold and hard settling in my chest. To destroy a child's sense of reality. To maintain operational security. Richard's methods were distasteful but effective. I looked down at the documents in my hands. Financial records, contact lists, operational details, all the evidence of the network that had enabled my abuse for a decade. Then I thought about Margot, alone in a hospital bed, probably wondering why her daughter wasn't there. About Agent Sarah Kaplan, using my mother's safety to manipulate me into cooperation. About Dmitry Volkov, willing to torture for information. About Sterling himself, standing in my living room treating my trauma like a business expense. All of them wanted these documents. All of them would hurt innocent people to get them. You know what? I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. I think I'm done being everyone's victim. I walked to the fireplace where Richard had enjoyed so many winter evenings while I hid upstairs, and I threw the documents directly into the flames. No! Sterling lunged forward. But Lucian was faster, his gun trained on Sterling's head before the man could take 2 steps. Stay exactly where you are, Lucian said conversationally. The documents caught fire immediately. Years of carefully accumulated evidence turning to ash in seconds. Bank account numbers, agent identities, operational details, all of it dissolving into smoke. Miss Vasquez, Sterling's voice was no longer polite. You have no idea what you've just done. I've just freed myself from being a pawn in everyone else's game. You've just signed your mother's death warrant. Have I? I turned away from the fireplace, feeling lighter than I had in years. Because it seems to me that without those documents, I'm no longer useful to any of you, which means you have no leverage over me, which means you have no reason to hurt my mother. Sterling's face had gone pale. Those files contained intelligence vital to national security. Those files contained the names of spies and criminals and arms dealers, people whose business is built on other people's suffering. I stepped closer to him, no longer afraid. Maybe the world is better off without them. You naive little. Mr. Sterling, Lucian interrupted, his gun never wavering. I think it's time for you and your men to leave. This isn't over. Yes, I said firmly. It is. Richard is dead. His files are destroyed. His network is broken. And I'm done being afraid of monsters who dress like businessmen. Sterling's tactical team was looking to him for orders, but he seemed to be calculating rapidly changing odds. Finally, he nodded curtly. We will be watching you, Miss Vasquez. I'm counting on it, because the next time someone tries to use me as leverage, I won't just burn documents. After they left, the house fell into an eerie silence. Lucian lowered his gun and moved to check the windows, ensuring they were really gone. That was either very brave or very stupid, he said. Probably both. I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. Think it worked? Think what worked? Making myself worthless to them. Lucian considered this. Maybe. Or maybe you just made yourself dangerous enough that they'll decide you're too risky to leave alive. My phone rang. Agent Sarah Kaplan. You destroyed them, she said without preamble. Yes. Do you understand what those files contained? Enough. I looked around the room where I'd spent my adolescence walking on eggshells. Do you understand what my stepfather did to me? A long pause. Yes. And you let it happen. Miss Vasquez. Don't. Just don't. I felt tears threatening, but pushed them back. Is my mother safe? For now. Sterling's people are pulling back. Dimitri's organization is in chaos without their financial records, and the Chechen Bratva has bigger problems to worry about. And Lucian? Another pause. Mr. Kane's situation is complicated. I looked at him, this man who'd protected me without asking for anything in return, who'd risked his life for someone he'd known less than a day. Agent Kaplan, I said firmly. I want to make a deal. Are you with Nora on burning those documents? Was it justice, or did she just make everything worse? And what kind of deal do you think she's about to propose? Let me know in the comments what you think should happen to Lucian. What kind of deal? Agent Sarah Kaplan's voice carried a wariness that told me she'd learned not to underestimate me. Full immunity for Lucian Kane in exchange for my complete cooperation in cleaning up the mess Richard left behind. I heard papers shuffling on the other end of the line. Miss Vasquez, Mr. Kane is a known criminal with outstanding warrants. Mr. Kane is a man who saved my life when your agency failed to protect a child for 15 years. My voice was steady, but underneath I felt something new. Not rage, not fear, but a cold certainty that I was done accepting other people's definitions of justice. He risked everything to help someone he barely knew. That's more than I can say for the CIA. Lucian was staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Surprise, maybe, or something deeper. Miss Vasquez, Agent Kaplan said carefully, you don't understand the complexities. I understand that you need my testimony to explain what happened tonight. I understand that without me, your investigation into Richard's network collapses. And I understand that I have something you want more than you want to arrest one crime boss. Which is the truth. About Richard's methods, his contacts, his victims. About how your agency enabled a child predator for operational convenience. I let that sink in. How would that look in a congressional hearing, Agent Kaplan? The silence stretched long enough that I thought she might have hung up. What exactly are you proposing? She asked finally. Lucian gets full immunity and protection for his cooperation in dismantling what's left of Richard's network. His organization gets to operate without federal interference, as long as they stay within certain parameters. You're asking me to make a deal with the devil. I looked at Lucian, who was now sitting across from me with his hands folded, waiting to hear his fate decided by others, again. Just like I'd waited for years while adults made choices about my life. No, I said. I'm asking you to make a deal with someone who understands that the world isn't divided into heroes and villains. It's divided into people who protect others and people who prey on them. And which category does Mr. Kane fall into? The same category I do now. Someone who's tired of watching predators win. Through the window, I could see the first hints of dawn beginning to lighten the sky. In a few hours, this would all be over, one way or another. I need to make some calls, Agent Kaplan said. You have 30 minutes. Miss Vasquez. 30 minutes, Agent Kaplan. After that I hang up and disappear, and you can explain to your superiors how you lost the only witness who can make sense of this mess. I ended the call and looked at Lucian, who had been silent throughout the entire negotiation. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly. Yes, I did. Why? I thought about how to answer that. How to explain that in the span of 8 hours, this man had shown me what protection looked like when it came without conditions, without price, without the expectation of gratitude or compliance. Because you asked me who hurt me, and you actually cared about the answer. Lucian's smile was soft, almost sad. That's a low bar for human decency, Nora. Maybe, but it's higher than anyone else has cleared in 10 years. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Margot asking for you. Says she needs to see you. Dr. Felix. My mother's awake, I said, showing him the message. You should go to her. What about you? I'll be here, cleaning up. Lucian. I stood up, suddenly needing him to understand something. Whatever happens with the FBI, whatever deal they make or don't make, you saved me tonight. Not just from Dimitri, or Sterling, or any of them. You saved me from believing I was only worth saving if I was perfect. He stood as well, moving closer but stopping just short of touching me. You saved yourself, Nora. I just witnessed it. Is that what you call it? I call it watching someone discover they're stronger than they ever imagined. We stood there in the pre-dawn light filtering through the windows. Two people who'd found each other at the exact moment when finding anyone seemed impossible. The house around us was destroyed, marked by violence and secrets and lies, but something new was building in the space between us. My phone rang. Agent Kaplan. "We have a deal," she said without preamble. "Terms? Full immunity for Mr. Kane, in exchange for information about Dmitry Volkov's remaining operations, protection and relocation for both of you if necessary. Your testimony about Richard's network in exchange for no charges related to his death." I looked at Lucian, who nodded once. "And my mother?" "Protected, relocated if she chooses, full medical support for as long as necessary." "What about Sterling, the Chechens, all the people who want revenge for those burned files?" "That," Agent Kaplan said, "is where Mr. Kane's expertise becomes valuable. We understand he has certain resources for dealing with international complications." I almost smiled. They were hiring Lucian to clean up their own mess. "Agent Kaplan?" "Yes?" "I want it all in writing. Every detail, every protection, every guarantee." "Of course. And I want one more thing." "Which is?" I looked around the house where I'd spent a decade learning that monsters could wear respectable faces, where I'd discovered that love could be weaponized, where I'd finally understood that sometimes justice looked like poison in a Scotch glass. "I want this house burned down, completely, until there's nothing left but ashes. Miss Vasquez. It's evidence of a crime scene that's been resolved. Richard's dead, his network is dismantled, his files are destroyed. There's no legal reason to preserve it. And the personal reason? I thought about Margot, about the years she'd spent thinking she was protecting me by staying with Richard, about the guilt she'd carry when she learned the truth. Some places hold too much pain to ever become home again. Better to start over. An hour later, I stood in the hospital parking lot watching smoke rise from the direction of my childhood neighborhood. The fire department would rule it an electrical problem, old wiring, overloaded circuits, the kind of accident that happened in houses that had seen too much. Lucian stood beside me, both of us watching my past dissolve into ash and memory. "Regrets?" he asked. "About Richard? No. About the house? No. About tonight?" I considered this, thinking about everything that had happened since I'd walked into his nightclub with a death wish and a head full of poison. "Ask me again in a year," I said. He smiled. "Planning to stick around that long? Planning to find out what happens when someone chooses to live instead of just survive?" My phone buzzed. Margot, calling from her hospital bed. "I should take this," I said. "Nora?" Her voice was weak but alert. "Where are you?" "I woke up and they said Richard is dead, and you weren't here, and I don't understand what's happening." "I'm coming, Mom, right now." "The house. Someone said there was a fire. The house is gone, but we're not." I looked at Lucian, who was already walking toward his car to drive me to the hospital. "We're going to be okay." "How can you know that?" I watched the sun rise over a city that looked exactly the same but felt completely different. A city where I was no longer hiding, no longer afraid, no longer willing to accept that powerful people's definitions of acceptable loss included my life. Because for the first time in 10 years, I'm not alone. When we reached the hospital, Margot was sitting up in bed looking fragile and confused and more beautiful than I remembered. The truth would come eventually about Richard, about the CIA, about what I'd done and why. But for now she was safe, and that was enough. Lucian waited in the hallway while I went in, giving us privacy for a conversation that would reshape both our lives. "Mom," I said, taking her hand. "There are some things I need to tell you." "About Richard?" "About everything." She squeezed my fingers. "Okay, I'm ready." And as I began to speak, telling her truths I'd been too afraid to voice for a decade, I realized that readiness wasn't something you waited for. It was something you chose, like courage, like love, like the decision to stop letting other people write your story. Outside in the hallway, Lucian was talking quietly on his phone, probably coordinating with Agent Kaplan, probably planning how to dismantle what remained of the networks that had enabled so much suffering. Tomorrow there would be testimony to give, statements to sign, a new life to build from the ashes of the old one. But right now, there was just this. My mother's hand in mine, truth being spoken in a clean, bright room, and the knowledge that some things once broken could be rebuilt stronger than before. "Hey, my friend, we're almost at the end now. How are you feeling about Nora's transformation? Do you think she and Lucian will make it work? And what about justice? Did burning everything down feel like the right choice? Drop a comment and let me know what you think happens next in their story." Through the window, I could still see smoke rising from where my childhood home used to be. But I wasn't watching the destruction anymore. I was watching the sun climb higher, painting the sky in shades of possibility. For the first time in my life, I was looking forward instead of back. 6 months later, the coffee shop on 5th Street had become our place. Not because it was particularly special, the espresso was decent but not exceptional. The pastries were clearly bought wholesale, and the Wi-Fi was spotty on good days. But it was neutral territory, a space that belonged to neither of our old lives, where we could build something new without the weight of history pressing down on our shoulders. I watched Lucian read through financial reports across from me, his dark hair catching the afternoon sunlight streaming through windows that actually opened a small miracle in a city of sealed corporate towers. 6 months ago, he'd been running a criminal empire. Now he was running a legitimate security consultancy that helped protect people like I used to be. The Kowalski case came through, he said, looking up from his tablet. Restraining order wasn't worth the paper it was printed on, but 2 weeks of our protection services convinced her ex-husband to relocate to another state. Permanently? Very permanently. I didn't ask for details. Some aspects of Lucian's new business model were better left unexamined, as long as the results protected people who couldn't protect themselves. My phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the therapist I'd been seeing since Agent Kaplan's people had connected me with proper trauma counseling. Making good progress. See you Thursday. Elena. Progress. Such a simple word for such complicated work. Learning to trust my own memories. Learning that survival instincts could be unlearned when they were no longer necessary. Learning that love didn't have to hurt to be real. How's your mother doing? Lucian asked, following my gaze to the phone. Better. The house in Vermont is good for her. Far enough from the city that she feels safe, close enough that I can visit. I took a sip of my coffee. She started painting again. That's good. She painted a portrait of Richard last week. Lucian's expression sharpened. How do you feel about that? She burned it afterward. I smiled, remembering the call where Margot had described the ceremony she'd held in her backyard fireplace. Said it felt like saying goodbye properly. The truth about Richard's life and death had taken 3 months to tell completely. The CIA connection, his role in my abuse, what I'd done and why I'd done it. Margot had listened to all of it with the quiet strength I'd always known she possessed, but had rarely seen her use. She'd cried, of course. For the daughter she'd failed to protect, for the husband she'd never really known, for the 10 years they'd all lost to lies and manipulation. But she'd also said something that had surprised me. I'm proud of you for surviving, and I'm proud of you for fighting back. Agent Kaplan called this morning, Lucian said, pulling me back to the present. Good news or complicated news? Both. Sterling's arms dealing network is completely dismantled. Turns out burning those files was exactly the right move without them. His organization couldn't verify which assets were compromised and which were still secure. They had to shut down everything. And the bad news? Dmitry Volkov is dead. I felt a chill run through me. How? Car bomb. Very professional. Probably the Chechens, settling scores from the chaos after Richard's death. Do we need to worry about retaliation? We? No. Lucian's smile was slight but reassuring. Turns out that when criminal organizations destroy each other, law enforcement is remarkably uninterested in investigating too closely. Through the coffee shop window, I watched people hurry past on their way to jobs and appointments and lives that had nothing to do with intelligence networks or criminal empires. Normal lives. The kind of life I was slowly learning to build. I got a call from Harper yesterday, I said. Your friend from college? She wants to meet for drinks. Catch up. I played with my coffee cup handle. I haven't seen her since before. Everything. Are you ready for that? It was a question I'd been asking myself a lot lately. Was I ready to reconnect with pieces of my old life? Was I ready to explain where I'd been for 6 months without going into details that would traumatize someone who'd never had to think about survival? Was I ready to be just Nora, not a victim, not a witness, not someone defined by what had been done to her? I think so, I said. I think I'm ready to be a person who has drinks with friends and complains about work and talks about normal things. What would you complain about? You love your job. I did love my job. Working with Agent Kaplan to develop better protocols for protecting assets' families had turned out to be exactly the kind of work I was good at. Detail-oriented, emotionally intelligent, focused on preventing others from experiencing what I'd gone through. I could complain about my demanding boss who makes me work late reviewing security procedures. Demanding boss. Well, demanding boyfriend who worries about my safety to an occasionally excessive degree. The word still felt new in my mouth. Boyfriend. We'd been careful not to rush into labels, both of us too aware of how power dynamics could corrupt relationships. But somewhere around month 3, When I'd woken up from a nightmare and found him sitting in the chair beside my bed, not touching, not trying to fix anything, just present, I'd realized that what we had built was worth naming. I prefer attentive partner, Lucian said. I prefer overprotective worrier. Fair enough. My phone rang. Unknown number, which still made my pulse spike despite months of safety. It's okay, Lucian said, reading my expression. The dangerous unknowns would never call. They'd just show up. I answered cautiously. Hello? Miss Vasquez? This is Detective Rosa Kaplan with Metro Police. I'm calling about a case that might involve your expertise. I looked at Lucian, who nodded encouragingly. What kind of case? I asked. Domestic situation. Woman named Jennifer Cross. Her husband has connections to some complicated financial networks. She's trying to leave, but she's scared about what might happen to her and her kids if certain people think she knows too much about her husband's business. It was the kind of call I'd been getting once or twice a month since word had quietly spread through law enforcement that there was someone who understood how to navigate the intersection of family violence and criminal enterprise. I can meet with her, I said. Tomorrow afternoon? Thank you, Miss Vasquez. She's pretty scared. I understand. After I hung up, Lucian reached across the table and took my hand. You don't have to save everyone, he said gently. I'm not trying to save everyone. I'm just trying to make sure that when someone asks for help, there's actually help available. And if helping her puts you at risk, then I guess I'll have a very capable security consultant to help me manage that risk. His smile was warm. Always. As the afternoon stretched toward evening, I found myself thinking about time, how it moved differently now. 6 months ago, I'd measured time in heartbeats between Richard's footsteps on the stairs, in the space between his mood swings, in the countdown to my own planned death. Now I measured it in coffee dates with Lucian, in phone calls with Margot, in small victories for people like Jennifer Cross, who just needed someone to understand that leaving an abusive situation could be the most dangerous thing you ever did. What are you thinking about? Lucian asked. Sunrise, I said. This morning's? The one from 6 months ago, when we thought one of us would vanish by dawn. Technically, we both did vanish, just not the way we expected. He was right. The people we'd been that night, the suicidal abuse survivor and the isolated crime boss, had disappeared as completely as if they'd never existed. What remained was harder to define but easier to live with. Do you miss it? I asked. The old life? The violence? The fear? The constant calculation of who might betray me? He considered this seriously. No, but I miss the simplicity sometimes. Bad people did bad things, and I stopped them. Now it's all consent forms and legal consultations and working within systems that move like glaciers. But I've never slept better in my life. I knew what he meant. For the first time since childhood, I fell asleep without checking locks or listening for footsteps or calculating escape routes. Safety, it turned out, was something you could build rather than just hope for. Nora? Yeah? I love you. He'd said it before, but it still hit me like surprise every time. Not because I doubted it, the evidence was in everything he did, from the careful way he respected my boundaries to the fierce way he protected my independence, but because it was love without conditions, without power dynamics, without the expectation that gratitude and affection were the same thing. I love you too. As we walked out into the early evening, I caught our reflection in the coffee shop window. Two people who looked like they belonged in the world, who moved like they had somewhere to go and reasons to get there. People who had built something from the wreckage of their worst experiences. My phone buzzed with a text from Harper. Drinks Thursday at Kelly's? Want to hear everything about your mysterious disappearance. Doc. I showed Lucian the message. Ready for that? He asked. Getting there. I thought about it as we walked toward his car. I think the trick is going to be remembering that most people's problems are real, even if they're not life-threatening. Harper's going to want to complain about her job and her dating life and her landlord, and I'm going to have to remember that those things matter even though no one's going to die if her rent gets raised. That's very wise. I have a very good therapist, and a very good boyfriend. Definitely the boyfriend. We drove through the city as the sun set, past the nightclub where we'd met, now closed, and being converted into condos, past the hospital where Margot had stayed those first few weeks, past the lot where my childhood home had stood, and where a small community garden now grew. I'd planted tomatoes there in the spring, in the exact spot where Richard's study had been. Margot had thought it was morbid, but Lucian had understood. Some places needed to be transformed rather than abandoned. What do you want for dinner? He asked as we pulled into our street. Our street, our apartment, our life. words that still felt like small miracles. "Something we cooked together," I said. "Nothing fancy?" "Nothing fancy." As we climbed the stairs to our apartment, 3rd floor, good security, multiple exit routes, but not because we needed them anymore. Just because habits die hard, I felt that familiar sense of rightness. Not happiness, exactly, because happiness was too fragile and too fleeting. But something more solid, something like home. Inside, Lucian checked the locks out of habit while I sorted through mail that was actually addressed to us, at an address that was actually ours, in names that were actually our own. Normal mail, utility bills, a magazine subscription, a wedding invitation from one of his former associates who'd also transitioned to legitimate business. "We should go," I said, holding up the invitation. "To a wedding full of reformed criminals? To a wedding full of people who decided to build something new." As the evening settled around us, cooking together, eating together, watching terrible television together, I found myself thinking about the woman who'd called Detective Kaplan, Jennifer Cross, whose husband had complicated financial networks and who was scared to leave. Tomorrow I'd sit across from her in some neutral space, probably another coffee shop with decent espresso and bad Wi-Fi, and I'd tell her what I'd learned, that leaving was dangerous, but staying could be fatal. That survival sometimes looked like planning your own death, and sometimes it looked like burning everything down and starting over. That justice wasn't always legal, but it was always necessary. And that sometimes, if you were very lucky, the person who helped you survive became the person who helped you live. "Thank you," I said suddenly. Lucian looked up from his tablet, where he was reviewing security protocols for next week's cases. "For what?" "For asking who hurt me like the answer mattered." "It did matter." "I know, that's why I'm thanking you." Later, as we got ready for bed in the routine, we'd developed separate bathrooms because everyone needed space, but the same bedroom, because no one needed to sleep alone unless they chose to. I caught sight of myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me had the same face as the one who'd walked into Lucian's nightclub 6 months ago, but everything else was different. The way she held herself, the expression in her eyes, the set of her shoulders. This woman looked like someone who could handle whatever came next. This woman looked like someone who chose to be alive. As I turned off the lights, I thought about Jennifer Cross, probably lying awake somewhere across the city, planning her escape or trying to convince herself she didn't need one. Tomorrow I'd help her understand that there were people who would listen, who would believe her, who would help her find a way out that didn't require dying to be free. And maybe someday, she'd sit across from another scared woman in another coffee shop and offer the same gift, the knowledge that survival was just the beginning, that the real work was learning to live without fear, and that sometimes the best revenge was building something beautiful from the ashes of what tried to destroy you. Outside our bedroom window, the city stretched out in all directions, full of people navigating their own complicated relationships with power and justice and love. Some of them were Richard Hawthorne's, using their authority to hurt people who couldn't fight back. Some of them were like I used to be trapped and scared and running out of options. But some of them were like Lucian and me, people who'd looked into the abyss and decided to build bridges across it instead. In the morning, there would be work to do, cases to evaluate, people to protect, systems to change one conversation at a time. There would be phone calls with Margot, therapy sessions with Dr. Rodriguez, meetings with Agent Kaplan about new protocols for asset protection. There would be life, in all its messy, complicated, beautiful ordinariness. But right now, there was just this. Falling asleep next to someone who loved me without conditions, in a place that was truly safe, with the knowledge that tomorrow would bring new challenges but nothing I couldn't handle. 6 months ago, I'd planned to disappear by sunrise. Tonight, I was planning to wake up and keep building the life I'd never imagined was possible. Some stories end with justice. Some end with revenge. Some end with redemption. This one ended with something better, the quiet revolution of choosing to live fully, love deeply, and protect fiercely, in a world that often rewards none of those things. Richard Hawthorne was dead and buried and forgotten. Victor Sterling's empire had crumbled. Dmitry Volkov's war had ended with his own destruction. But Nora Vasquez and Lucian Kane? We were just getting started. And that's how our story ends, my friend. Not with a bang, but with the promise of tomorrow. What did you think of Nora's transformation? Did she and Lucian earn their happy ending? And what about that final image of them building bridges across the abyss instead of staring into it? If this story moved you, hit that like button, drop a comment sharing your thoughts about justice, survival, and second chances, and subscribe for more stories that explore the beautiful complexity of human resilience. I'd love to hear where you're watching from, and what part of Nora's journey resonated most with you.